Hey everybody, Paul Gottshagen here again, talking about a series of predictions that ISG is making to help you think about how to orient yourself around the key trends that are going to be happening in 2023. And I'm really excited to have Steve Hall here. Many of you probably know Steve, and some of you may not. Steve is he has a lot of hats here at ISG. He runs our European business, our EMEA business. He's also the leader of our digital practice. He runs a lot of the technology strategy around data monetization and platforms at ISG. And if that wasn't enough, he's also well known for being the voice and the driver behind the quarterly ISG Index, which is our really popular quarterly report on what's happening and what are the key trends in the technology sector. So thanks for joining, Steve. And you spend a lot of time with clients and spend a lot of time looking at the market. You're a big thinker. As the viewers here are thinking about 2023, I'm sure there are a dozen trends you could talk about. I'm going to pin you down and force you to just pick three of some of the biggest mega trends that you think will have an inflection point as we cross over into the next year.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that intro, Paul. And I think you're right. I need to get rid of some of my hats. But it's fun and it's been such a great journey this year. So, three predictions. I'm going to go against some of my economic friends and some thinking here. First of all, I think tech spend is going to accelerate in 2023. I do agree with some of the concerns around inflation, potential recession, but in general, digital is no longer discretionary. Digital spend is no longer discretionary for clients as we go forward. Second trend, right? Second trend, I think we're actually going to see a further acceleration of cloud as we really move forward going into 2023. And the reason for that is really the energy crisis. The energy crisis across Europe, the energy crisis, quite frankly, across the world. You integrate that with ESG agenda, carbon neutrality, what we're trying to achieve. I think the cloud providers, especially the hyperscalers, are really well positioned to help us solve both of those problems. Third, think of Meta. Think of the metaverse. Think of everything that's happening. Now, we've seen this big collapse of cyber. We've seen this, or let me say, not just cyber from a security standpoint, but cyber, cryptocurrency and those components of it. But what's really taking off is sort of how we think about knowledge workers, how we think from shop floor to top floor, and what AR and VR will do with those. So that's where I'm going to put my bets. Digital economy taking off, cloud taking off, and the workplace of the future is all digital. So what do you think?
I like them, and they're all somewhat connected, and yet they stand on their own as key things to focus on. And let's take that first one, Steve. Digital spend is not discretionary. It's interesting that you would take a somewhat contrarian point. Like you said, a lot of people are thinking you've got to hunker down. Your point is you can't afford to miss that boat and just focus on cost optimization. So, first of all, peel that layer of digital into what are the subsectors? What does digital even mean these days? And what are the parts of digital that are non discretionary next year?
So, Paul, I think the spend on digital and why I'm taking a contrarian view is over the last several years, we sort of seen the market at 7.5 billion of ACV per quarter. It was good, but most of that spend was coming from IT. Through 2022, we really saw 9 billion of spend per quarter, significant growth that was going to the service providers that we typically cover. But what we saw was growth across the enterprises. Now, what do I mean by that? Engineering, industry specific BPO, applications, they all increased significantly. The challenges that we saw, or the opportunities, even better word for it, that we see is engineering is exploding. So everything from IoT, integration, IT, OT, IT talking to operations technology, all of these things are changing how we do work. Manufacturing is being completely disrupted with electronic vehicles, batteries, different components come together, all of which requires a really different way to manufacture and develop those. Knowledge workers have changed, where industry specific BPO, from claims processing, loan processing, critical care, all of that is now driven by digital technologies. And they're all being driven at the top end of the market. So I think what you're going to see is continued spend there. And again, even as we go into what could be a tough recession, could be difficult for retail and others, I still think on the tech side, we're going to see really strong growth for most of the service providers in the space, but also across banking, insurance, manufacturing, utilities, energy. I think you're going to see a lot more spend on the technology side of the house.
Well, then, just one follow up question on that, not really a prediction, but just given that prediction, how do you advise clients to find the money to fund these non discretionary digital investments while they're just managing day to day operations?
Yeah, it's a brilliant question on a lot of fronts, because if you think about some of the capital is going to increase for them because of the inflationary pressure, the interest rates, and things there. But more importantly, there's a great cost optimization play here. So how do you think about reducing your cost of software, reducing your cost of network, reducing your cost of capability across? Once you do that, how do you take that money, reinvest it into some of the digital, components that we talk about? But I also think there's going to be new money. There's going to be spend coming from manufacturing. There's going to be spend coming from other organizations that's just not an IT bucket anymore. And finally, I think the last thought on this is there's going to be a lot of revenue generating opportunities because of the digitization of data. And those revenue opportunities will have an own business case. You'll see spend go into that as we see more and more sort of the monetization of data, just like we're doing internally. You're going to see lots of organizations do that externally as well.
Well, let's move into your point number two, your prediction number two. So interesting. Everybody talks about cloud. We care about cloud, and people recognize cloud has been a key driver for many years and continues to gain momentum. I haven't heard much about this connection to energy in the way you stated it. So, talk a little bit further. What's the connection between energy? Of course, you're there in Europe where it's maybe even more top of mind, though it's top of mind everywhere. So you're probably on the cutting edge of how clients are thinking about energy. And what's the connection to cloud there?
Yeah, so it is. So first of all, energy prices have absolutely doubled across Europe. I know we're in the States this week. We look at the States from a thing, and we think of, gas, just petro being, 3.50, $4 a gallon, right? Let's just think of it from a consumer standpoint. In the UK or in Germany or across the world right now, across Europe, that's $2 a liter. Now that $2 a liter works out to 9.45 a gallon. Think of that, what it means from a consumer standpoint. Now explode that into the data center costs. And what we're seeing is an 80% cost of just on power consumption within the data centers. We're honestly seeing bills just double for power, and we don't see a quick end in sight to this. You kind of couple that with agreements from what were both the Paris Accord, the latest COP, how we think about climate change and what we're doing. We've got to get better dollars on the energy. We've got to reduce carbon emissions. We've got to be able to get better control of the costs there. And quite frankly, the hyperscalers are well skilled in this. The hyperscalers have much more energy efficient solutions, more carbon neutral solutions, quite frankly. And the energy costs in the cloud are significantly lower than the energy costs within the internal data center. We're putting that together to drive sort of that new view of what they think and how they drive that forward. Now, it's interesting because they've also done a lot of studies for this. Microsoft several years ago sunk a data center in the North Sea, started processing and seeing, hey, what could we do from cooling, which is a big cost, to, for the data center, drop a data center into the North Sea and let the water naturally cool. Incredible uptime went up, costs were dramatically dropped, the carbon emission footprint was dramatically different. So lots of good stories and good anecdotes of what we're seeing with the cloud providers as it relates to the energy consumption and how we think that will drop, quite frankly, going forward for a lot of enterprise clients.
Okay. Very interesting. And yeah, I would shudder to pay $10 a gallon for gas. You're right. I can't even imagine. So that's hey, just keep going on cloud. I know another topic you referenced might not be directly tied to energy is this industry verticalization concept as it applies to cloud. And I know the hyperscalers and many others are putting together these industry cloud solutions. So this is something that is definitely real. It took shape in 2022. So talk about where industry cloud goes in 2023 related to this cloud push.
Yeah, I love this trend, and it's a great question, Paul. So if you think about the cloud over the past, let's just take the past 5 years, the real push has been getting workloads and consumptions in. You sort of go back 2009, things started really coming. The last 5 years have really been acceleration of the workloads. That's been a lot of heavy lifting, cloud native apps and everything else. What we see now, because of both the regulatory environment, data sovereignty, lots of associated issues, the hyperscalers are working directly with GSIs in a really mutual thing to say, let's have specific solutions for healthcare. Let's create a cloud solution that tackles healthcare directly, where we can make sure we've got a safe, HIPAA compliant, regulatory compliant environment, and we can have targeted solutions that may be heavy on analytics or create different solutions where we can process patient data in a secure environment. These are allowing organizations to come together. We used to kind of call them community clouds, but now they're really truly industry solutions where the hyperscalers are also creating capabilities to better exploit the capabilities from a technology standpoint to go forward with it. We're seeing it in healthcare, we're seeing it in insurance, we're seeing it in financial services. I think you're going to see it in a lot of different industries where it just makes sense. Oil and gas is a natural one. How do you bring together resources to really help on the analytics on the upstream side or the exploration side of it? Be a lot of different solutions that come together. Hyperscalers and GSIs coming together to solve that is going to be a great use of our resources.
Okay. Let's talk about workplace services. You mentioned that as your third one. Uh, we're in a post-COVID world, kind of, in terms of workplace, and we all know, like, it's funny when I get an out-of-office email, I'm thinking you were never in the office. So many people and then never go to offices, and those of us that go to offices all the time or some of the time, it's different. And you had mentioned front, back, middle. Talk some more. And so people know that workplace services is important. It's changed a great deal. What are the trends now? What's changing as we move into 2023 in this broad area of workplace?
Yeah, let me put this in a couple buckets because I think it'll help the conversation. Let's think of the first category of, let's say, knowledge workers in general. We'll just use that as a category. Knowledge workers, we go to meetings, we interact a lot, we collaborate a lot with each other, we do a lot of diagrams, we do a lot of PowerPoints, we do a lot of Word docs. That's sort of the work that we do, as we go forward. Now imagine that you're sitting in a meeting. 2020, we would have, let's call 2019, we would have all been sitting in the meeting together, conversing, sharing. Today in the hybrid world, some of us may be in a conference room, some of us may be in Zoom, some of us may be in Teams, some of us may be on a phone. How do we build an environment where we all feel collaborative? Right? When I go to conference calls today, sometimes it's difficult if there's a group in the conference call and everybody else isn't. How do you make sure you've got a good experience there? Well, what we're seeing in organizations like the European Central Bank is an example. New solutions that really integrate virtual whiteboards and collaboration boards, screens around all of the video conferencing rooms, people dialing in and sharing stuff in such a much more interactive way. Now you couple that with what I think is going to just be an explosion of AR, VR type solutions. I think we're going to really enhance the way that we collaborate with each other. I really don't expect us to be back in the offices in the same way anytime in the future. Now, I know there's some leaders that disagree with me. I think Tesla, Meta, Google, some others that have massive campuses are really encouraging people to come back and trying to get that feeling. And I think there's a level of collaboration there. But for many others, it's much more about creating this collaborative feeling through different medias, whether it's the Oculus headsets, whether it's the collaboration that we're doing. We're just seeing an explosion of technology. And I think 2023 is when this is all going to come together. 2020, 2021, we scrambled. We did okay, but that's each of us across the planet had to step up and figure out new ways to do it. I think what you're seeing now is the technology is going to come together. We'll have whiteboards, we'll have different things besides just Zoom or Teams or Riverside or other apps that will really help us be able to do that next level of collaboration. That's the first bucket. That would make sense.
Made a lot of sense. I mean, I will start. Let me just say, you got me right between the eyes because I hate to admit it, but I kind of have a rule where I don't allow these hybrid meetings where some people are in person and some are virtual because it never works for anybody involved. And because you're always catering to one or the other. So I liked your first one in the metaverse. I think it seems like workplace services is one of the early entry killer apps for Oculus. You know.
It really is. And we're going to have to rethink that, right? Because a lot of us think that you want to make it very inclusive, and that's a core value that we have, right? So, how do you make it inclusive using technology to do it, recognizing that there's a lots of ways for different people to work? The second thing, think of the field workers and think of whether it's in manufacturing on the shop floor or in the field with mines or people that do dangerous work on equipment. What if we were able to create a virtual reality, IoT, data driven environment where you could work in a much safer environment, maybe from home, maybe from different centers, where you could interact with the equipment or the machinery or the fields in a much safer way, right? So how could we integrate autonomous driving, autonomous solutions with AR, with VR to create this where you have all the right knowledge at the right time presented to you in such a way that you can now interact to do your job much safer, much better working conditions, better insights on what you're doing. And I think what we're seeing now, and I've seen some great early insights on this, is we're going to be able to pull that together. In 2023, we're really going to take that experimentation to the next level. And I think you'll see much deeper integration all the way through the entire organization on how we start using AR, VR, enhanced reality, if you will, to create a much better workplace. A great example is training. Now, if you think about training environments, I love LinkedIn training. As you said early on, I'm a very inquisitive guy. I go through lots of courses, but it gets boring just watching video, right? What if I could be more immersive and have this immersive experience where I'm completely connected, just as if I was in the classroom? I can interact with colleagues and things as I go across. It really changes how we learn and how we think. And I think you're going to see more and more of those immersive experiences as we go forward.
We knew it was going to go beyond gaming, the metaverse, and AR VR, and it seems like it's really happening. Well, Steve, this has been great. I have one more little curveball at the end here. I know you're one of the most voracious readers I know. I think you and Prashant are kind of tied. So, any book recommendations? So, like one book that you'd recommend us to read to get set for the new year?
For 2022, I would have to say Bill Gates's How to Avoid a Climate Disaster was absolutely my best read. Matter of fact, I read it twice because it does such a great job breaking down the challenges that we have globally and some real solutions to get there. It was just so focused on what we could do. I would absolutely have to give my hat off to Bill Gates this year for that one.
I think your dogs agree with you, Steve, and thank you. Just
I
teasing you.
always agree.
We all Hey, look, thank you so much for this. It's always great. I love hearing your thoughts all the time. I benefited from all the time, but it's great for everybody to hear what's top of your mind and your predictions. And I'll say we won't hold you to it, but we'll be back in a year and see how you did. How's that?
I love it. I like it. I think I can do that.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Take care.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul.